Plus, an amazing story of survival. A pilot crashes his plane in hopes of keeping himself alive.
Tonight at 11, join us for the latest details on this unbelievable story of survival.
Tonight, Point 6 News talks to the pilot following his dramatic rescue.
This is KATU, the power of 2000. Now, Channel 2 News.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cindy Brunson. Welcome to Channel 2 News this Saturday morning. A 52-year-old pilot is back in the warmth and comfort of his home after spending a freezing night in the mountains. Buck Ramsey was taking his first solo flight in 22 years when he ran into bad weather in the Blowout Creek area near Detroit. Reporter Sheila Hamilton has the miraculous tale of his survival.
The beer bottle with the blue ribbon is a promise delivered by the pilot who first heard Buck Ramsey's distress call.
The biggest thing was keeping him calm because when you panic, you lose thinking ability. And so I was trying to keep him calm. In fact, I told him, we'll get you on the ground and you'll have a beer on me.
Mark Henschel was flying near Salem when he heard Buck's mayday. For 2 hours, he acted as a relay to the communication tower, a lifeline of support.
Mark, come on, and I'll tell you what, it was like giving a drowning man an arm. It's basically what it was. Mark, he stayed with me until I went in.
The last thing Mark heard Buck say was that he'd run out of gas and was going down. How Ramsey survived from there is reflective of his ingenuity and good sense.
I had enough sense to maintain my battery so I could talk to these people, and then I figured if an aircraft got close enough, I could turn on my rotating beacon to help them zero in, because I had a white airplane, and it was covered with snow, and the only thing that was sticking out was the tail.
Buck had often said that it wasn't enough to know how to fly, but you needed to know how to crash, and you don't do one very well without knowing how to do the other.
Through it all, the former Marine said he prayed and kept a stubborn sense of humor.
And I thought, well, maybe I'm already dead. Yeah, well, like I said, I've watched them, where they're out walking around doing their thing, and I go, well, I don't think so, because if I was dead, I don't think I'd be hurting this bad. So.
A National Guard helicopter crew endured rough weather before tracking Ramsey's emergency signal to his plane.
We decided to name that little area up there Lucky Bucks LZ.
What does the LZ stand for?
Landing zone, ma'am.
Sheila Hamilton, Channel 2 News.
Ramsey says he managed to stay warm through the night by ripping out the liner in the plane and plugging all the windows and holes with his briefcase and flight books. He has cracked a vertebrae, but could actually be released today.
Site involving an airplane in a vacant field, or a lot even, and told you about a fatality. And here it is. Somehow, somebody is able to land in some of their most remote country in all of Oregon at nighttime in the middle of a snowstorm and survive. Well, that made it all worthwhile for the crews who had such a terrible search. It looked bleak when the searchers got to work this morning. They were in trucks, snowcats, and on horseback, and running into problems left and right.
It was snowing great guns up there. I mean, there's at times you could see perfectly clear, and then at times the snow would come in, the fog would come in, you couldn't see a thing.
We're having a lot of problems with the signal because of the severe rock faces in the area. It's bouncing the signal off those rock faces, so it's really hard to pinpoint the signal.
Steep cliffs and heavy timber around Detroit Lake lowered the odds of a successful rescue.
We haven't had any contact from the pilot at this point.
But then a breakthrough. National Guard rescuers spotted the wreckage on this steep mountainside. Still, rescuers on the ground feared the worst. Then they heard the word they were waiting for.
How far was the survivor from the crash site? He is at the crash site.
Survivor. But the drama in the hills wasn't over. The chopper needed fuel, so it dropped off the medical officer with the victim, took off, fueled up, and came back. Then the weather moved in, and the chopper was stuck on the ground with its crew and a victim in severe pain. Finally, the pilot makes a decision to go for it and takes off through the bad weather safely to Salem. So at one point, the people in the command center went from the jubilation of knowing that they had found the victim and knowing that the victim was alive to fear they could lose the crew and the victim up on that remote hillside as the bad weather started moving in. It's been a real up and down day for them. They told me that when it was all over, they were high-fiving and cheering in the command center at the Detroit Ranger Station. What a successful story. What a great ending, Joe.
It sure is. Gary Chittum, live in Detroit. Thanks very much. He calls himself one lucky duck, the 52-year-old pilot who survived the crash of his small plane and then a night in the cold and snow is also thankful for a persistent voice on his radio. Buck Ramsey was rescued near Detroit Lake yesterday. Bad weather put ice on his plane's wings during a trip from Lebanon to Estacada, and his Mayday call was heard by another pilot near Salem. Ramsey says that voice was his saving grace.
Mark, come on, and I'll tell you what, it was like giving a drowning man an arm.
Mark Henshaw lost contact with Ramsey just before he crashed and didn't know what became of him until he saw Ramsey in the hospital. Ramsey has a fracture in his lower back and lots of cuts and bruises, but he'll be just fine. He says it's not enough for a pilot to know how to fly. He's got to know how to crash, and that may very well have saved the life of a 52-year-old man from Lebanon. Tonight, Buck Ramsey tells you himself what happened after his small plane went down outside Salem.
I had a white airplane, and it was covered with snow, and the only thing that was sticking out was the tail.
Buck Ramsey crashed near Detroit Lake Thursday after ice covered the wings of his Cherokee 150. Ramsey rented the plane, flew it to Estacada to check out a plane for sale, but bad weather scrubbed the trip.
And I go, well, there's only one way out, and that's up. See, that I'm going to fly on the side of a mountain, and I don't know where it's at.
I was uncertain.
His Mayday call was answered by Mark Henshaw, also flying near Salem. Henshaw relayed Ramsey's messages to the ground.
Well, the biggest thing was keeping him calm because when you panic, you lose thinking ability. And so I was trying to keep him calm. In fact, I told him, we'll get you on the ground and you'll have a beer on me.
Mark, come on, and I'll tell you what, it was like giving a drowning man an arm.
Buck Ramsey spent the night in the cold, wrapped in the ripped-out liner of his plane. Friday, he started hiking, soon to be found and rescued by the Army National Guard.
They were flying in some pretty nasty weather, and I got to hand it to them folks.
He calls himself a lucky duck. His family will tell you he's just too stubborn to let something like a plane crash get in his way. Buck Ramsey's in fair condition at Legacy Emmanuel Hospital.
Really bucking and snorting, so I thought, well, I'll try her once more, so I went around.
It was too windy to land at Lebanon's airport, so he flew low through mountainous canyons and ravines, but snow dropped visibility to zero.
I go, well, there's only one way out, and that's up. See, that I'm going to fly on the side of a mountain, and I don't know where it's at.
The weather got worse.
What I'd done is I was calling the Mayday, and Mark answered, because I couldn't raise anybody else, because I didn't know how low I was and what mountain was between me and them.
Mark Henshaw, another pilot flying outside the bad weather, heard Ramsey and relayed his radio messages to the ground.
The biggest thing was keeping him calm because when you panic, you lose thinking ability. And so I was trying to keep him calm. In fact, I told him, we'll get you on the ground and you'll have a beer on me.
The last thing Henshaw heard Ramsey say was that he'd run out of gas. Ramsey crashed, but knew he wasn't dead because he hurt too much. He used the cabin liner for a blanket and plugged the broken windows with a briefcase and some maps until the next day when he heard the rescue helicopters.
They were flying in some pretty nasty weather, and I got to hand it to them folks.
His wife, Chris, says it was Buck's savvy and common sense that saved his life.
He said it wasn't enough for a man to know how to fly, but he has to know how to crash.
And the hospital now lists Buck Ramsey's condition as fair. A CAT scan found only a fractured vertebra in the lower part of his back. Nurses have told the family he may be able to go home as early as tomorrow with a back brace. Jeff?
Okay, a great ending to what could have been a very, very tragic story. Thanks, David.